Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back to talk about the new 3-star heroes for episode 5, as well as the 2 new exclusive equipments for Arunka and Ken. Normally, I don't make impressions videos for 3-star heroes, but these ones are pretty interesting, and there's a couple things I want to say about them, so I figured why not. And then, again, we'll talk about the 2 new exclusive equipments, because I think that, at least for one of them, it's pretty game-changing. So, let's jump into it and talk about Claudia first. This is my favorite of the Slayers so far in the story. She is very energetic. I really like energetic girls. I like her character design. Very tomboyish, very cool looking character. And she's a Knight of the Aries Zodiac symbol, which I'm also a huge fan of that stat line. If you watch some of my How to Play stuff, you know I really like this stat line. It's like my favorite for a Knight. The problem is, just like with Kane's side story, they kind of did Claudia dirty. This kit's really not that good. And again, if you know, you know, this character's probably not getting a specialty change anytime soon. So, S1 is simply a 50% blind chance at max skill level, and then the soul burn for 10 souls increases the chance by 100%. Not really the greatest S1. S2 is Slayer's Determination, increases her effectiveness by up to 30% based on skill level. When suffering an attack that targets all allies, activates Retaliation to the attacker. Can only be activated once every 2 turns. Retaliation pierces through the enemy before attacking, decreasing attack for 2 turns, and grants a barrier to the ally with the lowest health for 2 turns. Barrier strength increases proportional to Claudia's max health. It's cool that she has an identity. It's just not going to be as good as Last Rider Krau's. And unless Retaliation hits like a truck, like if it does a ton of damage for some reason, then we might be in business. But otherwise, yeah, it's just a alright passive. Gives her an identity, but the S1 is pretty bad. This one is not as good as the other anti-AoE stuff that we already have for tanks. So yeah, that's not really that great. And then finally we come to Indomitable Resolve. Reaffirms Resolve, granting immunity to all allies for 2 turns, and recovers health of the caster. Amount recovered increases proportional to caster's max health. This is pretty disappointing. This is honestly a really bad skill for a knight to have in 2023. This feels like an episode 1 character skill. It's pretty bad if I'm being honest with you. And it sucks because Claudia in Kane's side story has this really insane version of Indomitable Resolve. I wasn't expecting that, but would have been nice to have gotten something close to it. So for those of you who don't know, in Kane's story, Indomitable Resolve is Destina's S3, but it also gives 2-turn defense and attack buff to the whole team. I wasn't expecting a 3-star to get that, but like I would have liked it if it was like a full AoE cleanse, and then gave like defense and attack buff to the entire team, and then, you know, recovered some health. I think that would have been pretty good. And then you give her a passive that makes her like kind of like Christy, where she has a ton of ER. That would have been a much better design than what we got for Claudia. Again, pretty disappointed to see that that's what they went with a character that I really like the design of. Next up is Amiki. This is the character that I feel like a lot of people really like the design of. She is a Scorpio warrior, so similar stat line to Arunka, who we'll talk about a little bit later, as well as characters like Rem, for example, from the ReZero collab. I want to talk about the S2 first, because it makes the entire kit kind of pop, puts it into focus for you. That is Desperate Resolve. Grants immortality for 1 turn, and increased attack for 2 turns to Amiki. Upon receiving lethal damage when this skill is available according to cooldown count, grants immortality for 1 turn, and increased attack for 2 turns, and fully increases the skill cooldown here. So this is basically Kayron or Kane, or, you know, those kind of passes where they're about to die, they get the immortality. But it has an activated component if you want to get an additional bonus earlier, potentially. That is basically your choice. I think this is them testing out a new design for this. Maybe they might give Kayron an attack buff if you activate his skill and give it an activated component later on down the line. Or maybe it's something for them to try for a new 5-star coming out. I think it's an interesting design, and I'm just assuming that this is like a test, like them testing the waters to see how this plays out. So I think I really like where they're going with this. Tabling back to the S1, attacks the enemy with a sword with a 50 to 75% chance based on skill level to provoke for 1 turn, cannot trigger a critical hit, and penetrates the target's defense by 30% after attacking when the caster's health is 30% or less. grants an extra attack with the same skill. So essentially, if you are about to die, you'll get the immortality from Desperate Resolve. And then when you get to attack, you will get 2 of these 30% defense penetrating S1 provokes, which is pretty good. Assuming that the multiplier is good, because this character doesn't have an attack increase like a Senya or an Arunka would have, for example, or like Hua Yang. So she can't critical strike, so I hope these multipliers are good. Lastly, we have the S3, which is Avenger's Sword. Slashes the enemy consecutively to attack. Cannot trigger a critical hit. Penetrates the target's defense by 30%. And when the caster's health is 30% or less, penetrates by 70%. When the caster is immortal, grants an extra turn. And then Soulburn for the cost of 10 souls increases the damage dealt. So this one's worded a little weird, because I can't tell if it's 30% and then you add 70, 30% and then multiplicatively we get 70 more, or if it's 30 changing to 70. So that is very confusing. But if you proc Immortality, then you get the Avenger's Sword, and then the extra turn, and then you get 2 procs of Divine Punishment. So that's potentially some pretty big damage coming out based on the multipliers on this move. Overall, I think Amiki has a very interesting kit. It is very experimental, I feel like. So we might see elements of this kit incorporated into other 5 stars or buffs on characters into the future. I don't particularly think Amiki herself is like super great. But again, this feels like a design experiment. Speaking of design experiments, based on Amiki in the story, she kind of rushes headlong into things based on, you know, Desperate Resolve, Avenger's Sword. She's very desperate for revenge. I think it would be pretty cool, and I'm going to shoot my shot now. I think Amiki's the first one to get a specialty change, and based on her reckless behavior, ends up becoming a vampire later on in the story. My reasoning for this is that basically the only characters that have this grants immortality when they're about to die are vampires or otherworldly characters like Charon. And if you recall, the leader of the Slayers for us in this patch is going to be Veronica with her vampire killer passive. So it would make a lot of sense for Amiki to rush headlong only to get turned and then have to be taken out by vampire killer, her comrade Veronica. I think that that would be like galaxy brain level design to basically give the character this kit that's very unassuming. But if you're paying attention to the vampire killer passive, if she gets a specialty change where she becomes a vampire, and then vampire killer just all of a sudden starts working on her, I think that's like really, really sick. So prove me right, Smilegate. Prove me right. Show me your galaxy brain designers that have had this all figured out for months. Please, I would love to see it. Like, it would be the coolest thing. I love it when gameplay and design, you know, like when the story, its design overlaps with the gameplay. When we get that intersection, it's like the best feeling in the entire world. Finally, let's talk about Ezra, who I think is by far the strongest of these 3 stars. And that is because he is a Virgo Thief. We only have 1 Virgo Thief so far in Epic 7, and that is Peyra, who clocks in at 128 base speed. That means Ezra is probably coming in at around 124 base speed, if I had to guess. That's very fast. That is 300 plus speed tier fast. And his kit is pretty good when played with other characters that are similarly fast. So the S1 is Take This. Attacks the enemy with a sword with a 60 to 75% chance based on skill level to decrease attack for 1 turn. You could soul burn that to 100% for 10 souls. That's whatever. It's the other part of the move. After a successful attack, deals 1000 fixed damage for each debuff inflicted on the target at the end of the turn. Holy crap. So this is very good for potentially some PvE scenarios, but largely for you to take care of problematic things that Cleave or Aggro might have trouble with, like a Spirit Eye Celine, or like a Roy Mustang, although this is green versus that, or like Tempest Surin. So there's some stuff here. This is good for very sticky characters in those comps. S2, Slayer's Bond passive. When the foremost ally uses a non-attack skill, it increases combat readiness of the caster by 10 to 20% based on skill level. Can only be activated once every 2 turns. So, most of the other similarly fast, aggressive openers, over 300 speed, they have non-attack skills that generate a decent chunk of debuffs. So that's very, very good for the fact that this character does fixed damage based on each debuff on the target. So just imagine this scenario now where we have Rand in the front, uses the S2 to proc Slayer's Bond, soul burns his S3 from the book that he's going to have from Requiem Rowana on his team. That's going to give you Stigma and Defense Break on the entire enemy team. Then it's going to be Requiem Rowana's turn. She's going to press S3. It's going to do a ton of damage and reset the cooldowns. And then we have Ezra come in using his S3 here, Leave Me Alone, which is an AoE attack with an 85 to 100% chance to make all enemies unhealable, restrict them, and decrease their hit chance for 2 turns. A successful attack deals 1500 fixed damage for each debuff inflicted on the target at the end of the turn. So, if we're doing quick maths here, unhealable, restrict, decrease hit chance, Stigma, Defense Break, plus whatever damage he and Rowana did off of their AoEs respectively, that is going to be minimum 7.5k fixed damage, I believe, plus whatever damage that you dealt with Rowana, and then the base damage of Leave Me Alone. That's a cleave, baby, like, all by itself. Like, I think everything but Eaton dies to that. Like, again, on paper. We'd have to actually see how it pans out in real life, but that's a good kit. That's a really good kit for a 3-star. So, he might be another Orte. We all thought when episode 4 came out, Orte was going to be this insane, aggressive character. That might be the case with Ezra. But I think this is definitely one to look out for. He might have some pretty interesting applications for cleave, maybe aggro. And even then, I'm not sold on the fact that he might not be good in PvE. So definitely keep an eye out on this character. Let's wrap it up by talking about the 2 new exclusive equipments. First up, we have Advent of Destruction on Ken. Grants him 12% critical hit chance. Love to see it. That's one of the big stats that we're looking for on a damage dealer if they need it. First one here is on S1 Knockout. Increases the chance to defense break by 10%. Usually, this is not something we're looking for unless it gives us 100%. There's definitely better options. Specifically, the S2 Celestial Kick. Triggers a dual attack from the ally with the highest attack when using Celestial Kick. Oh boy, man. This one is nuts. This might be one of the best exclusive equipments of all time. I have the second episode of Sue Talks coming out tomorrow, where we talk PvE with a very special guest. And one of the things that we talk about is how dual attack is probably one of the most busted things in the game, and is definitely one of the strongest things you could be doing in any form of PvE content. It's what makes challenging content easy. It's what makes Dagger Sakar significantly easier to accomplish. So Ken might be going from straight up best in class in Ancient Inheritance to best in class in Abyss, in Expedition, in Advent. Like, this character is going to be a superstar in PvE because of this exclusive equipment. And obviously with this much hype on the second one, you're probably not taking the third one, which is Phoenix Flurry. Just gives him health when he uses his S3. Sure, whatever. The S2 is insane. Insane. One of the best exclusive equipments of all time, in my opinion. It cannot be understated just how strong guaranteed dual attack is for any form of PvE content, which is where Ken is really shining right now. Next up, we come to Arunka. Her exclusive equipment gives her 10 speed. Traditionally, I say this is the thing to look out for. 10 speed is usually a game changer for a character. But Arunka, who has a base speed of 102, is pretty slow. So this kind of brings her up to the middle of the pack at 112. So not exactly the best. There's probably somebody out there who will try and take this character to 300 speed because of the speed EE. And to me, I say more power to you. That feels like a meme. This is kind of smoothing over some of her problems. It's going to make her obviously better, but not too much better in my opinion in terms of the speed. But the exclusive equipments, there's one in particular that might be pretty good. It synergizes well with the 10 speed as well as the game plan, and that's going to be the third one. Let's quickly talk about the first two, though, before I dive a little bit deeper into why I think the third one's the best one. So first up, S1 Dagger Throw increases bleed chance by 20%, so we go from 50 to 70. Again, not 100%, so we're probably not taking it. Next up is the increased damage on the S3, Thrashing in the Prairie. You're only going to be taking this one if you are struggling to get kills with Arunka, which can be obviously remedied by having better gear. So I don't think the experienced Arunka players are going to be taking this one. Therefore, it's very clearly the third one. Increases combat readiness of Arunka by 30% when using a Thrashing in the Prairie. Since her rework / buff, Arunka's game plan is pretty on point. Bring her into barrier-based characters. Her passive makes her zoop to the front if they have barriers. You use a Thrashing in the Prairie. You kill them. It resets the cooldown. And then hopefully Arunka gets a second turn where she can thrash again, kill somebody, reset, thrash again, kill somebody, reset, and keep going. And then you hopefully pick up the dub. Obviously, having an extra 30% combat readiness on a thrashing in the prairie allows you to achieve that game plan quite a bit better. I don't know if 50% would have been too broken, but yeah, this is definitely a big boon. I'll be very happy to see how this plays out. I would love to hear from Redos, the resident Arunka enjoyer, how he feels about Arunka's exclusive equipment. So, Red, if you're watching the video, let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on Arunka. And for the rest of you, let me know your thoughts on the new 3 stars and exclusive equipments. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong on some of these things? Did I miss anything in particular? As always, let me know any and all thoughts. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Bye-bye now.